Welcome everyone to our next Ringside chat. We're having a ton of fun with these. I do have a couple ideas for a couple more at least. If you have something you would like us to address, or if you think you'd make a great guest, let me know. We don't want to do more than one a month, but I think at least once every quarter we want to do these. It's a great way for National Beagle Club to be providing education, to be providing insight, fun chats, things like that. These are open to anyone. You don't have to be an NBC member. That's part of why we also record it. Because again, it's about sharing information, letting people know what NBC is all about, all of those various things. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our special guest speaker today. When I was thinking about who we wanted to have for the start of the year, this was somebody that I thought, we need this person. He's been in Beagles quite a long time. So let me go ahead and just read his bio. So Eddie Dziuk has been actively involved in the sport of purebred dogs for over 40 years. He started when he was 4, right? He obtained his first Beagle in 1977, finished its championship as a junior owner handler, and has never been without the breed since then. He has bred or owned more than 75 Beagle champions, including 5 national best of breed winners and 11 best in show winners. Eddie attended his first Westminster Kennel Club in 1980 as a junior and handled his Beagle to best of variety. The following year, he returned to place in the Westminster Kennel Club Junior Showmanship Finals. Many more WKC wins followed, culminating, of course, as we know, in 2 Best in Show winners with Uno in 2008 and Miss P in 2015. Professionally, Eddie holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics and an MBA from the University of Missouri. For the last 20 years, he has been the Chief Operating Officer of the Orthopedic Foundation for Animals, where he has the unique opportunity to combine his business and management experience with his love of dogs and a passion and interest in canine health. So again, Eddie, welcome so much. We are so glad and happy that you were able to join us for this evening.
All righty, thanks, Deb.
Go ahead. I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you go. If folks have questions for now, just kind of put them in the chat. We will open it up to where we can just really have a good give and take chat where you can ask your questions. You can take yourselves off mic, but we want to kind of start with a little bit of presentation from Eddie, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. So the bio that Deb read, that was actually, she needed that kind of quick, so I sent off the one that I used for the Westminster Kennel Club. That's why it was kind of garden focused. In terms of what I got going on here tonight, none of this it's very unscripted. Deb didn't really have a solid game plan. She just said, would you be willing to just chat about your life in Beagles? And I said, sure. So this can go really any different direction that people are interested in. I can talk about sort of how I got started. I can talk about some of the different dogs I've had over the years, some of the people that have influenced me, some of the dogs that have influenced me. If anybody wants to ask a question, I'm not offended. If you take your Zoom off mute and just chat out loud, that's fine. And then also, I believe Deb is going to try and monitor the chat room. And that would be your primary way of trying to ask a question if there's a particular topic that you'd like to see me address. We'll try and keep it to a max of an hour, maybe a little bit less, since on the East Coast, we're already getting a little bit late. But other than that, go ahead if you guys have topics that you'd definitely like to see me chat about. If not, what I did just to kind of get through this was just sort of, I did a little pictorial slideshow of just some different topics and dogs and so forth. So I think probably one of the most common things that I would hear would be sort of, how did you get started in dogs? And I came from a family where everybody in my family was just as dog crazed as I am, but I'm not a second generation dog show person per se. So we had every different type of pet imaginable, a couple purebred dogs, but never any kind of show dog. So how did that all really start? And it came in a lot of different directions. My sister's roommate in college showed dogs. And then one of our close family friends, when I was in junior high school, got a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and they put me on as a co-owner of this dog, and I took him to obedience classes. And the obedience classes were actually held in the parking lot of a grocery store that was within a bike ride from my house. And so religiously every week I took the Ridgeback to the obedience training classes, and we had a great time. And in the course of doing that, this innate passion for dogs really just grew. And I knew that this was something I wanted to be more of a part of. So again, we trained the Ridgeback and so forth, and I just pled with my parents to have another dog of our own. We had 2 mixed breed dogs in the house at the time, and they said okay. And I was kind of really into the Ridgeback, and I would have loved to have had a Ridgeback, and they said that was too big of a dog. So there was a lady that belonged to the Kennel Club. It was the Mason-Dixon Kennel Club in Hagerstown, Maryland, where I lived. And that lady was Mary Cease, and she was a very successful beagle breeder at the time in the Mid-Atlantic. Her kennel name was Hollyhocks, and I got to be very close to Mary. And through that relationship, I decided, and since my parents wouldn't let me have a big dog, that a beagle is what was going to join our household. Unfortunately, Mary, she had like a litter planned, and it didn't turn out, so she didn't really have anything available. So we started scouring other opportunities to get a beagle, and believe it or not, this first dog, first beagle that you see here on the slides, was actually purchased through a classified ad through Dog World magazine. And I suspect if you go to a lot of people back into the 70s and 60s and so forth, a lot of them probably found their first dogs through Dog World and the classified ads in the back. Anyway, this was a pretty handsome dog. I was really lucky to get such a nice dog as my first beagle. And he was a grandson, actually, of Marcia Foy's famous Kings Creek triple threat on the sire side. And his dam, as it turned out, was a litter sister that had been bred by Jenny Coleman of Colburn Beagles. And she was a litter sister to Jack White's best in show winning Colburn Sonnet of Briarwood. So, I mean, here, just out of this classified ad, out of the back of Dog World magazine, I got this beautifully bred, really handsome dog. I was just incredibly lucky. And so that picture on the left, that's actually where we attended our very first dog show. And we were very lucky to go winner's dog. And when I was looking through these pictures, this is something I never really picked out on, but I think it's important to point out. I don't know if any of you guys pick up on the fact that for a very first dog show win picture, and you look at him, and he's, undoubtedly a nice, handsome dog with lots of virtues and qualities and so forth. Not a great one, but a nice dog. But look how nicely he's trimmed for a very first dog show. And I thought about that when I looked at the pictures when I was putting these together. And so one of the other things I need to point out is just how lucky I was throughout my life to have really great mentors, and how important mentorship is at the dog shows in general. The reason this dog is trimmed so beautifully at his very first dog show is that, I had this beagle. My dad bought me all the equipment. So we had our little tack box with, probably a pair of scissors and a chalk block or something. I don't remember, but not much in it. So we had all the gear. We have the table and the arm and everything. And so there we were. And this guy was a couple spots over from us in the grooming area. And he obviously looked and saw what was going on and just took pity on me. And he came over and he introduced himself and said he had beagles, and he trimmed my dog up for me. As you can see, did a really nice job. And we walked into the ring, our very first dog show, and got our very first points. And that gentleman, his name was Jack White of Briarwood Beagles. And so, it choked up, but Jack was turned out to be a lifelong friend of mine. He was a huge powerhouse in beagles in the late 60s and 70s. And I was just really incredibly lucky that he took pity on that poor kid who had no idea what he was doing, right? And trimmed the dog up. And it's also kind of cool because a lot of people don't recognize some of these judges from the past, but the judge there is Winnie Heckman, and she was an all-breed judge, all-rounder, and she was sort of at that point in time regarded as one of the greats. So it's just kind of a fun story how I lucked into this really nice dog. Again, I don't remember exactly how old I was there in that picture, but it was probably 78 or so. I think I was in junior high school, and we finished the dog pretty rapidly. Again, just as a junior handler, not really knowing a whole lot, but I had a nice dog, and had a lot of people showing me what to do and how to do it, and it was a really good start. And then the next dog that came along, and I won't go through each dog in this kind of detail, but it's just kind of fun seeing the real starts. So this is a bitch. Her name was Champion Hollyhock Spinky's Wild Lowell. And this was my first female beagle. And she was actually bred by Mary Cease, the lady I met at the handling classes. And I ended up co-owning lots of dogs with Mary in those early years. But this was my first female beagle. Again, she finished really pretty fast. And sort of the cool thing here is we went to our very first Westminster Kennel Club in 1980 with our, my two dogs, and were hugely lucky again to win the variety there, which started a long line of some very memorable Westminster wins. And again, she was very beautifully bred. She was a daughter of Rockaplenty's Wild Oats, and out of a Wagon Wheels bitch. Wagon Wheels being the kennel that kind of dominated the Mid-Atlantic region in the late 60s, early 70s. And the Wagon Wheels breeder, her name was Evelyn Droge. So kind of cool. What else do we have here? And again, like I mentioned, I was very active in junior showmanship. So I was showing my dogs in the breed, showed them in juniors. My last show in junior showmanship was Westminster in 1981, and we made the finals and placed fourth. So that was a very memorable thing. I always like to mention what I think juniors got in some ways, it got a little more attention back then, because nowadays, Westminster, they hold the junior finals. I think it's around 7:30 in the evening. The judge is really under a tight timeline to get it done. Then they get the ring cleaned out and everything. Then they do the big national anthem, and the groups begin at 8 o'clock. What was different back then is they actually did that whole opening with the color guard and the national anthem and so forth right before juniors. So, in terms of things that you remember that had a real impact on you, I will never forget, back in 1981 in that ready ring, the lights going down, the garden being pitch black, then the lights coming up gradually, the Star Spangled Banner plays, and at the end of it, they go, "May we have the juniors in the ring." And it was just, one of those things that you don't forget as a kid. And then also, when I was in juniors, that was the National Beagle Club at the time. That was when they first decided that they were going to give juniors recognition. So I was actually the very first recipient of the National Beagle Club's Junior Handler of the Year award. So kind of cool as well. And then just another old dog I want to point out, because it was a really special dog to me. This was a dog I called Dallas. He was my very first homebred champion. So he was out of that garden bitch. And he ended up not only being my first homebred champion, but my first group winning dog, my first owner handled group winning dog. And he was a multiple group winner. And I also included a picture of Tom Glassford showing him, winning a group on him. And again, the reason I want to show that is just that emphasis on mentors and so forth. So as I went through my career in dogs, my life in dogs, lots of people had a huge influence on me. But Tom and his wife, Andrea, Tom was a really hugely successful professional handler and later AKC rep. And almost became, well, he was family too, sort of became a second father figure. But again, that importance of mentorship. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of shout out and credit to some of those people. So again, in Beagles, I would absolutely not be anywhere that I am today without Mary, without Jack White. Ralph Alderfer was a huge influence. I got to travel to a lot of dog shows with Ralph. Nadine Chacoin was another hugely influential person on me in my early Beagle years. And then in the non-Beagle side, back in the day, I used to travel to lots of dog shows. My dad couldn't take all those weekends off, so I went to lots of dog shows with Karen Ash, who lived fairly close. Bud Dickey and Joseph Bergnetti, who are the famous Stassen Poodle Kennel. I spent 2 summers there working for them in the kennel. And of course, Tom and Andrew Glassford, that was a sort of a lifelong relationship with them. And then I also had the great experience as a junior handler doing lots of road help at dog shows. And I worked on weekends for Ted Young. I worked on weekends for Bob and Jane Forsythe. And it's almost like an alumni when you talk about the different people that got to work for Bob and Janie, and what an experience that was. So that's kind of the early years of Beagles. And then I kind of usually break things into phase one and phase two. And phase two, so if you sort of think about that in the early 80s, I'm finishing up high school, going to college. In college, I was without a dog, but I still went to lots of dog shows, traveling with Tom and Andrew at Glassford and so forth. But now I graduated college in '85. I'm without a dog for a short period of time, starting to work, starting to make some money and so forth. And I started looking for another dog, and met Wade and John, and along came a dog called Chevy, and he basically really changed the direction of my life in a lot of ways. Such a hugely influential dog, not only in the ring as a sire and as my best friend, and of course as the sire of Judy. And that started the second phase. And basically every dog that I've had since then, with the exception of Sage, the bitch from Australia, every single dog that I've shown or been involved with in some way is a descendant of Chevy and Judy. So yeah, pretty cool dogs. So with that said, that's sort of how I got started, my early life in dogs. I think the tracing back to Chevy and Judy is really important, and then everything sort of comes forward from them. I've got slides and pictures of other dogs and so forth that stem down that I've been involved with. But I think it's probably a good point maybe to try and entertain some questions and so forth.
We've had a couple that have been posted. One of the questions was, and I'm sorry, I just I muted somebody on accident. I was meaning to unmute myself. One of the questions was, you were so successful as a junior handler. What was it like to then judge juniors?
Okay, let's see if we can go forward here a little bit. There's a method. There we go. Mm-hmm. So not only is it, do I love judging juniors, but it was kind of profound to place in juniors back in '81, and in 2009, I was invited by the Westminster Kennel Club to come back and judge the junior showmanship finals. And the young girl that I put up there showing that Doberman is Scott and Susie Kipp's daughter, Dylan, who of course has gone on to be a very successful junior handler. But back to the details of the question, I love judging juniors. It's not always easy, and it's not easy. Not only do you have to sort through many times really talented young kids, but the hardest thing in the world is like when you have a class of 5 and you place 4 and you've got that 5th person walking out of the ring. It's kind of crushing. But I think that there's a lot of people who can follow my juniors judging really easily, and there are other people who probably shake their heads and wonder what in the world is he thinking. But there's lots of little things that I pick up on as being a former junior and as being somebody that has had a lot of success showing as an owner handler of my own dogs, and who really kind of gets into the some of the quirky handling aspects and so forth. So as an example, if somebody, let's say I've got 2 equally really good kids, and one kid is just really super professional, and the other kid maybe misses the mark just a little bit on that same degree of professionalism, they're still a really good handler, but I can pick up and visualize the bond that kid has with their dog. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go with the young handler that has the bond. So things like that, I really look for. I look for if a junior goes the entire class of whatever class they're entered in, and I pick up on the fact that not one time did they talk to their dog, it's very unlikely that they're going to place or do well under me. Mm-hmm. They've got I need to see something. Talk to your dog. Tell them they're a good boy, a bad boy, something. But show that there's some relationship going on between the two of you, and then it's not just this robotic down and back turn and give the a cursory smile, some kind of fancy rub down their top line or something. I don't want to see any of that. I want to see relationship with the dog. I want to see. I'm also a real stickler on breed specific handling. So I think you guys will understand what I mean by this. If a junior puts their beagle up on the table, and I like to see them stacked, not being held by the lead, but that's one thing. But if they're holding the dog by the lead and I come up and they're holding it by the lead and it's pulling that dog's ears up and totally distorting the expression, or if I see a junior with a beagle holding the lead and holding bait out in front of it, like you would typically see a Doberman or a boxer or something like that being shown, that to me is not breed specific handling. As a matter of fact, it's uncharacteristic for how our breed should be shown. So I'm a real stickler on those. If somebody is showing a collie, I don't want them to walk the collie up and set up 4 legs. I want them to stand in front of the collie, and it doesn't matter if those legs are not perfectly 4 square. I want to see them stand in front of the dog and show off the dog's head and expression, which are the key parts of that breed. So, I'm just a real stickler on showing the breeds in juniors as they were intended in the good days, if you will, the purest aspect for that breed. So that's kind of my thoughts on juniors. Again, the dogs need to be shown appropriately for their breed, and there needs to be some relationship between the junior handler and the dog.
Mm-hmm. I think we see, in shows when the handler really has that good relationship with their dog. I mean, it's just so, they need to start it as a kid and then go, as an adult, having that same thought process of really having a relationship with your dog. Well, we've got another question. It's along the lines of, what do you look for when you're picking potential show puppies? What is the ideal age? What are you looking at in the pedigrees? Are you really looking for a lot of winners, a lot of champions, all of those? What characteristics are you looking for?
That's a really difficult question. You're looking for all of the above. So it depends upon specifically what your objectives are. I'll go ahead and I'll be honest and say that I've picked out lots of 8, 12, 16-week-old puppies, 6-month-old puppies that I thought for sure were going to be my next best in show dog, and never turned out to be anything other than barely a champion. So I certainly don't claim to have any more expertise in that area than other people. Dogs change, they grow up. Sometimes they fulfill our expectations, and sometimes they don't. What I will say is that a lot of beautiful puppies can fall apart and become very average adults, but I've seen very few average puppies grow up to be very special adults. So if you're trying to normalize faults or discount faults and so forth in young dogs, the chances of those things improving and getting a whole lot better, I think, are a lot less frequent than things that are looking okay as puppies being kind of falling apart.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of, what you're looking for, you need to also have are you looking for purely the next winning show dog? Are you looking for something that's going to be a next great breeding dog and so forth? If I was looking for a great show dog, I would probably discount and not really want a dog that had a brown front leg, right, on the show side. But if I was just concerned with a dog that could have a great impact on a breeding program, would I care about a brown front leg? Of course not, right? So you do need to remember that there are things, right or wrong, such as markings, which will influence potentially a dog's show career if that's the kind of thing that you're trying to make your selections on and your decisions on.
Are you looking?
And obviously temperament is a huge thing as well. So there are dogs that have heart and can make you believe that they are great dogs. And that obviously plays a part as well.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to ask was, especially when you're looking at puppies, are you looking for certain traits? Are you looking for the one that is playing the most? And granted, they all play and they fall asleep, but is there some type, where they're kind of the leaders of the pack? The ones that just have more energy, or is it, just kind of you want to see them having fun?
I don't know that I've got the answer to that. Again, because just so many things can change. I do know that I've certainly had dogs that had outgoing young temperaments,
Hmm.
and those temperaments followed them their whole lives. And I've also had dogs. I've struggled with some temperament issues over the years, and had different dogs that seemed great at the beginning, and then just out of the blue seemed to see mirages, and where they came from, and they just decided that they didn't want to be a show dog, and they were happy, wonderful dogs at home, and they just didn't like to go away. So, I don't, and a lot of those were dogs that I raised identically from the ones that were great show dogs. So I don't know, but I will say, I think that there is, in my mind, without question, there is a heritable component to that temperament aspect.
Hmm.
And I did find that instead of trying to work my way out of some of those dogs with lesser temperaments, I was better off when I just said, I don't want any more part of those lesser temperaments. I think temperament is a really difficult thing to overcome and breed away from.
What are some more Beagle breed specific handling tips? And what do you feel is important according to the standard?
Well, I think there's no question that I think they're a challenging breed to show. They look really easy, but they're. I don't think they are terribly easy to show. Um, I think the biggest thing I always found is, I don't know, people that watched me show my own dogs with any degree of success over the years. I think that they would all agree when I say that I didn't show any of them the same way. And I can think of some people in Beagles that have been very successful, and every dog that they've shown down the line that they handle the exact same way. And I think some dogs it's a great fit, and in other dogs it's not a great fit. So when I say I've never shown two dogs the same way, every one of them I've tried to find what motivates them, know their faults, know what you can do to minimize, highlighting those faults. What can you do to highlight their good points? So there are some dogs that I showed on Rescos up. There's some dogs that I showed on choke chains. Some I showed on a cloth choke. Some up. Some on the choke on the side. You just need to know your dog and know what works for the dog, and let the dog guide you instead of you trying to make that dog do something. You need to figure out what can you do to make the dog do it for you.
Mm.
It sounds kind of corny, but if the dog wants to do it for you, you'll get much further than if you try and make the dog do something that you want. So there have been dogs that I could not hold by the muzzle. I would try their entire careers, and they would never let me do it. There are dogs that I could hold by the lip. There are dogs where so they're all different, and you just need to know, just like as people, we're all different. All these dogs are different, and they all have slightly different temperaments. And experiment. Figure out.
Mhm.
What do you get the least resistance of from the dog, and what does the dog respond to the most? Um, what makes the dog happy, what brings them joy, is it food, is it toy, all those different things. You just need to experiment, and just don't settle into a rut where you do everything the same with every dog.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to experiment and do different things.
What is the role of DNA testing in breeding, both in terms of health and conformation?
Well, in terms of confirmation, I don't think that it plays much of a role, because we certainly have no DNA tests for shoulder layback or top line or eye color, et cetera. In terms of health, I think it plays a huge role. Um, I think the trickiest thing is I think the biggest thing is as more DNA tests become available, that breeders understand that it's an incredible tool, but it's not the end all be all. And there are lots of DNA tests that people need to learn to interpret correctly. So there are certain DNA tests that are based upon, single autosomal recessives, where it's very straightforward. There are other DNA tests that are out there that are probability tests that allow us to make some assumptions regarding underlying genes. There are some that are single genes that we're testing for, but where we do believe it's still a polygenic disease. And I mean, I know Oleg is listening, so I mean, he could jump in and correct me if I say anything wrong. So I mean, the bottom line is DNA testing plays a huge role, but we need to remember that it's a tool, and we need to remember with each disease that we're testing for, you need to take into consideration what is how much influence does this disease have in terms of quality of life? How much influence does this disease have in our entire gene pool? So how prevalent is it? If we're talking about a disease like a dilated cardiomyopathy or something like that, which is causing dogs to be frank, to drop dead when they're only 4 or 5 years old. And if you can use a DNA test for a disease like that, that's incredibly powerful and needs to be used widely and judiciously. On the other hand, I don't mean to minimize something like factor 7 in beagles and so forth, but is it creating huge cause of quality of life issues? Not really. So it has value, but it's a tool. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that you would ever want to base a breeding decision on a single DNA test or a panel of DNA test results when there's so much else to consider. No dog is just an eye, just a hip, just a heart, just a top line, just a tail set. It's this, you have to have a very holistic approach that looks at the conformation of the dog, the temperament of the dog, the health of the dog, the whole picture. And I would never, I couldn't see myself ever relying singly on a set of available DNA tests.
Let's just open it up. Who wants to go ahead and take yourself off mic and just ask questions? And please feel free, we're kind of anything goes here. We have crickets. Oh, come on. Y'all got to have some questions. All right. While you think about this, I do have a question.
Shoot.
Oh, here we go. Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
Hi. Just an observation that I've seen very long hocks in certain lines of beagles. I find the European beagles, or ones that descend from Europe, have a lower hock, which they're supposed to have. Just wondering if you've seen that and what your thoughts are on that.
As a judge, I definitely pick up on hock length, so it's sort of an interesting question. And I pick up on it, Kelly, not so much that in my exam process do I get to the rear and make a mental note of, what kind of hock length does this dog have? It's much more of I get back there and I pick up if it's something that he's out of balance. Like I pick up on the fact that, man, this dog's got big long hocks, right? So it's not like, again, in judging the dog, you go over the top line. Unquestionably, you are making a mental note. Does this dog have a level back? Does this dog have enough ribbing? Does it have a short loin? You're consciously looking for that and searching for it. When I get to a rear, I do not consciously evaluate hock length, but I absolutely pick up on it if it's out of balance. I don't know that I could make an observation that certain lines are more prevalent to long hocks than others. But it is interesting. It does remind me, because we talked about the idea of evaluating puppies and so forth. And that was just one of those weird things that I looked at when I looked at young puppies. And on those dogs, on those puppies, when you were kind of like going, oh, do you think it's going to be a 13 or a 15? Hock length was typically one of those factors that I looked at, which was kind of one of those keys to me that drove me. I think this one's going to grow up and be a 15, because even at that age, comparing it to other litter mates, the ones that were going to be sort of on the bigger side, even if everything else was sort of the same at that point in time, they had longer hocks that they grew into, and they became 15s. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but as in evaluating young puppies, that was something that I actually did look for and pick up on.
Okay. I'll have another one if nobody's
Sure,
going to say.
go ahead.
You mentioned tail set. Do you see that the dogs that have the bum after the tail have a better rear drive than ones that don't? The shelf after the tail, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, Kelly, and I'll be honest with you. I just don't ever know that I've looked to make that correlation. So in other words, if I've had a class of dogs in front of me and I've got a half dozen dogs and 3 of them had really nice push behind and 3 of them didn't, did I go that next extra step and try and figure out, okay, is there some very obvious physical confirmation trait that's right in front of me that I can correlate between the dogs with lesser drive and the dogs with the higher drive? And did that ever correlate to a dog that had more, as you're referring to it, as shelf or bum? I don't know that I could make that cause and correlation between those two. Sounds like it could be plausible, but I don't know that I've got the experience to sit here and say, yes, I have observed that.
So now you can keep an eye out for that and see.
So, I will, but I think that brings up a point, is that right or wrong, you can argue with me or you can disagree with me. But, another one of those things that the early mentor conversation, it was so cool. Mary was she collected lots of stuff and she had dog magazines. So in those early years of the, we're in the late 70s here, I basically had a decades worth of dog magazines at my disposal, from the early 70s through then. Gazettes, as well as the show dog magazines, all that kind of stuff. And just being so obsessed with dogs the way I was. I mean, I just poured through those magazines and stared at those pictures. And a lot of those, it was not conscious, but a lot of those outlines in those dogs are sort of burned in my memory. And so I think, again, right or wrong, when I approach judging, it's very much, I don't piecemeal at all. I mean, I'm looking at big picture, whole picture. How do things fit? Are things in balance? Does everything work together the way I think it should? Is the dog athletic? Does it hold the same outline and picture on the move as it does standing? I look at things very holistically. So that example of the long hocks and so forth, again, I can freely admit to you that when I'm going over your dog on the table, if I'm judging it and I get to that rear end, I am not judging it on hock length. I'm not sitting there going, does this dog have long hocks, short hocks, appropriate hock length? I'm looking at it big picture when I look at the dog from the side. And at that point, I will see, man, that dog's got hocks that are too long, that just don't fit. Okay. So again, I don't approach judging as, this dog's particular shoulder versus this dog's shelf behind the tail, or this dog's tail set. It's this very big picture. Does this dog look like a beagle? Does he have parts that are all harmonious and flow one into the other and are in balance? Does everything fit and work together? Does this dog have the outline that I really like and care for? And I think if you look at some of the dogs that I was personally the most successful with, there's a very commonality in their outlines. And I think that's what drew me to those dogs.
So in the past 30 years, what do you think we have gained and what do you think we have lost?
You know, I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, the breed's improved," or the, all this. I don't know that I really go along with all that. I mean, because I think we had some great dogs 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago, and we've got some great dogs today. And I think we had some pretty mediocre bad ones 30 years ago, and I think we had some pretty mediocre bad ones today. So I think that I think quality just ebbs and flows, and I think luckily I think our breed has luckily never gotten into some kind of a drought where we can't find nice dogs to breed to. I think that we're lucky there's always been quality dogs around. But I don't know that I buy into the whole, we've made, the dog is, the breed is in, so much better shape today than it was 20 years ago. The one thing I do remember very distinctly growing up, the one thing I think we truly have improved upon is fronts may not always still be great, and we may still have dogs that don't have the ideal shoulder laybacks that we're looking for, maybe a little too straight, maybe a little too set too far forward and so forth. But I do not see today swinging action the way that truly was very common when I was young. I mean, if you saw a dog that came at you clean on the down and back, if they came back and they were clean, that was a rarity. And I think luckily we can say that it's not necessarily a rarity today. So that's probably the one area that we're it's an ugly fault. It's an ugly fault to look at when they're moving towards you. And I think we've made huge progress there.
I have a question about going back to testing. I do embark tests on all my dogs, and I've been breeding field dogs, for over a decade. We never tested before. Now that I'm doing show dogs, over the last 5 years, I started doing, the embark test on all of them. So I've tested like 56 dogs now. But as far as hips and eyes and heart and all that, my dogs are relatively young. So, although I'm breeding, I haven't been able to do all that testing. And my question, I guess, to you, I don't know if there's a question in there, but my question is, how do I get to the point where I'm, testing all these dogs? Because I've kind of changed my breeding program, and, I don't even have the same dogs anymore. Now I've got new dogs that I'm trying to get my breeding program. And it seems like we move into a whole different stud. I don't use the same stud all the time. So it's hard to get to that point of testing all that after they're 2 years old.
Yeah. So again, going back to the DNA question, I don't want to minimize the value of DNA tests. But I think so much of it really depends upon, again, the disease prevalence, disease severity, and again, I don't want to minimize the use of embark. Every dog I've got has had the embark panel done because I think it's important information to have. But you've got to remember, you get this panel test back, and you've got it's a 6-page report at this stage, right? With 100 and some diseases, right? That it's coming back and it's giving a result on. And, I'm going to ask you, how many of those 100 have any applicability whatsoever to beagles?
8.
4? 8? Is that, yeah, right?
Yeah,
so
8 or 9.
Yeah. So, and of those that do have applicability, again, MLS, factor 7, glaucoma, and like the glaucoma, even though it's beagle specific, when that gene discovery was made, it was very specific to a research colony, as far as I know, and I have yet to know of any just run of the mill beagle that it's even a carrier for the primary open angle glaucoma test. So, but conversely, if I had Labradors, right, that embark panel would be hugely useful, because now I could test for, central nuclear myopathy, degenerative myopathy, exercise-induced collapse, PRA. That panel would include a whole host of diseases that would be of interest to me and have real world application in my particular breed. So, so I think that, again, you need to, I mentioned severity, prevalence in the gene pool and so forth, but breed specificity, that's huge. So, I mean, DM degenerative myelopathy is probably one of the best examples because from what we can tell, it's a really ancient mutation because it shows up across almost all breeds. And it shows up in mixed breed dogs and it shows up in wolf populations when they test it. You can find this mutation. And, our cultures are different. So in Scandinavia, almost all the dogs have health insurance. And so when they've run some statistics over there, the most common mutation that they found across dogdom, so not any specific breed, but across all breeds, is that degenerative myelopathy mutation, which also helps confirm the fact that it's probably really old and really widespread. So you have everybody jumping on the bandwagon. We need to test our dogs for DM. And, but it has been clinically seen in so few breeds that while that mutation that is absolutely necessary to cause the disease, there are, without question, there are other factors going on. So there are either other genes which are also in play, so it's polygenic and those genes are not discovered yet, or there are protector genes going on, or there's some kind of environmental influences. There's something else going on why these German Shepherds that have the mutation develop the disease, but wire fox terriers who actually have the highest allele rate of this particular disease don't get clinically sick. So again, it's just, the DNA testing, it's such an incredibly powerful tool because it's absolute. I mean, there's no subjectivity there. The dog either has the mutation, it has 2 copies of it, or it doesn't, right? But there's so much else to be taken into consideration. So is it applicable to your breed? Is it so widespread in the breed that you need to really be concerned about it? Does it have quality of life issues for the dogs? Is it so prevalent that you could never eradicate it, but you just need to figure out how you can best control it? So that's the tough thing. So while it is a great tool, the hardest part of it is the educational component in teaching people how to use the tool and how to interpret the results so that you don't get that 6-page embark report and start, scrolling through every single test result on there and claiming with pride, that your dog is clear for GR1. And then you go back and read, well, what is GR1? Well, it's the PRN mutation in golden retrievers specific to that breed.
So we hope
so
your
good for you.
doesn't have it.
Yeah. So good for you.
They better not have it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that was a rather long-winded answer, but so it's a really important tool.
Yeah, and then going forward into the OFA testing and the hips and the patella, that was part of the question is how do I, with a dog that's young that I'm breeding, how do I get to the point of testing that dog? I mean, do I test them after I've bred them because I'm going to breed them younger than they can test them? Sometimes.
Well, I think the best way is you need to prioritize what are the things that you are breeding for. So when every breeding, a great quote, a geneticist at UC Davis, Danik Lanash, said, every person that breeds a litter is doing a genetics experiment. So you don't think of yourself as a geneticist, but every time you make the decision to pair this dog with this bitch, you're conducting an experiment, right? And you are playing geneticist and you're doing selective breeding. So you need to decide in your particular scenario, what are, the list of things that you're going to influence in the selective breeding decision is so long. How are you going to prioritize? And then, the only thing I can say to you when you're talking about young dogs, old dogs, whatever, is that all you need to do is to look at a scenario like a late onset disease and come quickly to the conclusion that if that is something that's important to you, then you cannot breed the dog before you've done some kind of testing. So what I mean by that is you alluded to, well, can I breed my dog before it has its hips done or whatever? That's totally dependent upon if hips are one of your priorities. So I'll use an extreme example, but if you are, if epilepsy were a concern of yours, and epilepsy tends to, depends upon what type and breed you're dealing with, but if you're dealing with something that's not going to manifest itself to 4 or 5 years of age, and you're dealing with a line of dogs that may be prone to that, well, then you may need to make that very tough decision that says, I'm not going to breed my dog when it's a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old until it gets a little older, and I can have that comfort feeling that truly it is not going to have a late onset symptomatic development of this disease, and that I feel comfortable in going forward. Otherwise, if that's where you're putting your priorities, but you make that decision to risk it and do it young, then you're running the risk of just propagating it forward. So I can't tell you what to do. Nobody can tell you what to do. All of this is, there are so many decisions that go into selective breeding. No one can tell you what to do. You have to do what you believe is right. And what we typically see in dogs is everybody's gonna, they're gonna come up with all kinds of excuses, even if they think it's wrong, for why why it was right for them. But again, you need to consider conformation, working ability, temperament, and health. You need to consider all of it. And if you go down the road of not looking at the whole package, and if you only breed for health, maybe you're going to have some healthy, ugly dogs. If you breed only for conformation, maybe you're going to have some sick, beautiful dogs. If you forget conformation in the mix, maybe you're going to have the most beautiful dogs in the world, but they won't let anybody touch them. So you've got to look at the whole package, and you've got to figure out how to prioritize all those many traits and how to figure out how it makes it work for you. And that's why, simply put, that's why some people are more successful than others.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They figured out how to prioritize things and make it work.
We've got
Eddie, can I add to that?
Oh yeah, Oleg, step in, definitely.
Yeah, so speaking of hips, you can do preliminary hips at 12 months, and most likely it will not change, because in most of the country, OFA recognize hips, X-rays taken after 24 months, but everywhere else in the world, it's hips taken, X-ray taken after 12 months are considered final.
Yeah.
So it's a high probability they will stay exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
So jumping in there, Oleg makes a good point about that you can do prelims at a much younger age. And it's interesting because that actually, this is going to make me sound a little smarter than I am, but it fits very nicely into my discussion about puppies. So when I talked about a puppy, that the bad ones are never going to get better, and the good ones, things can still fall apart. That same thing kind of holds true. So if you've got, if you do a set of prelims at 12 months of age and they're no good, you know what? Their hips are not going to get better with age, right? And so you can use that information and maybe do a little upfront calling and eliminate that dog from going forward in what you want to work with. Versus, if they looked okay, and then again, it's how do they fit on that spectrum, on the extreme. So if you had a set of prelims that were excellent, well, they may not be excellent at 2, but you know what? The probability is pretty damn good that they're still going to be normal. They're going to be good, right? Or maybe still excellent. But if you had that dog that was at a prelim to fair, that may be the dog that as it grows is going to develop some arthritic changes or some DJD, and then that's not going to pass later on. So that is certainly available to you. It's a progressive disease. So it is one of those things where you can test early and get some information, just knowing that things can still change. They're not going to get better, so that you can eliminate dogs early on. There's other things that, they're just not progressive. So, you can pretty much do, once a dog has reached some level of physical maturity, you can do a patella exam. It's quick. It's a quick 30-second physical exam. And if they pass once that dog's mature, it's not like they're going to develop late in life patella luxation. But then you've also got to remember to focus on those things that are sort of important to the breed and so forth, and not get wrapped around doing a whole lot of testing that maybe isn't very breed specific or breed applicable.
We've got a couple more questions here in the chat. So one of them concerns straight pasterns versus slightly sloping pasterns. Are you seeing a straight pastern more associated with a short upper arm?
So again, I'm going to maybe come across as, not as smart as some people may think I am. And I make no claims to be brilliant about this stuff. So again, when I'm judging and when I'm looking at dogs, I don't know that I get hung up on, okay, this dog's trying to analyze this dog's pasterns and how does that influence upper arm length and so forth. I'm looking at the dog holistically, at that big picture, and I'm absolutely picking up on pasterns and feet and that outline look, right? So if you've got a dog that's extremely down in its pasterns, I will see it. I will pick up on it. You're not going to hide it from me. But am I, in the course of judging, and is that one of those mental notes that I get to the front legs and I look and I go down and I go, I need to remember and make a note on this dog's pasterns. I'm just not doing it. Again, so I'm looking big picture, picking up on where does it fall off the mark. And then certainly, again, right or wrong, I'm not trying to, in the ring, draw correlations between whenever I see a pastern with too much give, is this a dog that tends to be short and upper arm? That's not me, and that's not how I look at dogs. And again, it may work well for other people, and other people may have like real analytical minds that are trying to draw those correlations, but that's not me.
Mm-hmm. Another question, how do you feel about moderation in the breed? Are we falling prey to, if some is good, more must be better, and it doesn't really matter what body part, just kind of pick a body part?
Absolutely. So absolutely definitely believe our breed is a breed of moderation, with no exaggerations, and there's no question we all, it's inherent in our nature that if if a certain quality is deemed to be good, you want more of that. So whether that be neck length or ultra short back, or you said pick any body part. I think the one that I see most commonly, not only in beagles but throughout all breeds, are angles that just don't match. Rear angles that are so incredibly over angulated compared to what their front ends are, that it's just out of whack, it's out of balance. It throws my eye off, and it definitely throws those dogs off when I'm watching them go around the circle. They get completely different outlines. So do we fall prey to exaggerations? I think that we do. I think luckily not as much as some other breeds have, but I think it's always something to be wary of, and to keep our breed in moderation should always be a goal.
Cool. Do we have, we're at we're at the top of the hour. Do we have any other questions? And I can certainly, we can put them in when we post this on Facebook, we can add questions there, but who has some more questions? See, you've answered them all. Okay, Kelly.
Kelly is never shy.
That's right. Do white paws throw you off in the expression?
Yes. But what I would add is when you say a white haw, it makes me think of I think I'm thinking more in terms, it would almost be like we need to have a picture so that we can reference, so that we're both working off the same baseline. And the reason I say that is, do dogs have sort of a loose lower eyelid where you end up seeing all that excessive light? Do I like that? No, I mean, because I want a dog that has a nice tight eye. So I think I would almost need to know. I'm concerned. I'm concerned that we're not referencing the same thing.
Right, not a droopy eye. The third eyelid in the corner. That's white or black or dark. Like, I have one here. She's got one dark paw, one white paw. My eye goes right to that white paw because it just drives me crazy.
I would suspect, again, trying to visualize what you're describing to me, that I would also be drawn to that and think to myself, that is not attractive. And then and the difficulty, in terms of judging, I'll be honest with you, Kelly, the difficulty thing is that as soon as you are drawn to something that makes you take sort of well, certainly in any way unpleasant, but even sort of makes you take a second look or so for it. It's hard to get over it because, I mean, remember, you've only got that total, what do they say, an average of 2 minutes or so per dog. That's a lot of ground to cover in 2 minutes. And so as soon as you hit something that sort of turns you off a little bit, it's really difficult to get over. For better, for worse, right or wrong. That's how it is. That's human nature. And then also, just, be honest with yourself and then understand as an exhibitor, I can easily put myself in that position as a judge, but as someone that's, is still not in the thick of it like I was, but, still shows a dog occasionally and so forth. You always have a slightly different perspective as the exhibitor. So as the exhibitor, it's so easy to excuse and make an excuse for something on your dog. And for you, because you look at the dog every day, to overcome those things and to see the good, versus, that judge that got 2 minutes and, you gotta make a lot of times split-second decisions. And so, I saw a picture of somebody showing a dachshund. Hopefully nobody knows this person. I'm not going to offend anybody, but I saw a picture of somebody showing a dachshund and one of its eyes had been enucleated. So the dog it was a wind picture and the dog had one eye. And, there's the other eye, it's, sewn shut. And I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, you can make the argument that the standard doesn't say the dog has to have two eyes, but I'm sorry, as a judge, I'm not going to put up a one-eyed dog. So again, it's kind of a roundabout way, but you've got to just remember that the judges have only, a short amount of time. So if you bring them something that's going to make them question, then you just need to be understanding that if it doesn't go the way that you think maybe it should. Mm-hmm. So and that they're not going out of their way to find all those mm-hmm. good things in your dog that you see.
So one of the questions, it's funny, we just had the Daytona 500 this weekend. We seem to see a lot of racing around in the ring with our dogs. People are going faster and faster. It seems to be kind of a trend. What do you think about that?
It's not a trend. It's been around since day one. So, I mean, people moved their dogs too fast in 1975. People moved their dogs too fast in 2005 and 2015 and today. It's human nature. I think part of it is handler adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So you're in the thick of things. The judge says, take them around one last time. And, your dog is in second. And there's just a drive hits you as the handler. And so that's part of it. I think part of it is that there's some impression that running fast equates to covering ground, which of course it doesn't. So I think that there's all kinds of reasons, but there's no question that dogs are, in general, all dogs, beagles included, all dogs are moved too fast. And I routinely in my ring ask people to slow down.
Couple more questions.
And usually people are pretty good about listening to it. And I think I try and actually be not to have a conversation in the ring, but I actually try and say to them, don't you think your dog just looked much better? Didn't it feel better? I mean, I know as a handler, I could feel how my dogs looked, and I know I would be able to feel that the dog was moving better at that more appropriate pace than that forced, racing and running around.
What do you suggest to new exhibitors so that they can really learn to be successful?
Lots of things. Just, understand that you've got to, that you probably don't know it all, that you probably don't know very much at all. Be willing to take your losses. And that, that's not to say everybody should just lose and lose and lose and lose and take it, grin and bear it until someday that there's a turnaround. But you need to understand that it's, you're going to be competing against lots of people who have lots more experience and lots more knowledge. And that's one thing that's maybe not fair is that it's a game that pits everybody equally against each other, and they're not equal, right? I mean, they're not equal, but yet you have to compete against people as if they were. But the biggest thing I'd go back to, we didn't go through this PowerPoint that I did slide by slide, but we did hit on that early slide where I listed a couple people, and I specifically said I would not be where I am today without Mary Cease, without Jack White, without Tom and Andrea. And so unquestionably, I think every one of us that has had success, Deb, I can look at you and I know that you've had, you had Connie to look up to for all those years. And, Kim and Tim, you had John and Chris, you had Wade and John, and, those early mentors that can form and drive how you're going to look at it. It doesn't mean that you need to be mirror images and think identically. I mean, you can be independent, free thinking, but be a sponge. That's the advice. Mm-hmm. Be a sponge. Because there's lots of people that, if you ask, they'd probably be more than willing to share. Mm-hmm. So be a sponge.
I love it. We've had a request. People want to see your other slides.
I'll just go through some real quick ones. Just a lot of these are just favorite different dogs. So we had, Chevy and Judy. Chevy, of course, he was my first national specialty winner. He was also best of winners at the national, best dog winner 2 years. That picture in the lower right-hand corner, that is actually his daughter. Her name was Lambert Broadway Hit, and she won the 13-inch variety from the classes, where he won the variety and went best of breed, and she was best of opposite sex, best of breed. There's Tom showing Chevy. And then Judy is, of course, that's the dog everybody associates me with. And to this day, that's my heart dog. I was really, just to not belabor the thing, but I'll just share real quickly the story, how Judy came to be. So when I had Chevy, I was a one dog owner. I was fresh out of college. I, was working, my new corporate job and so forth. I had one dog. I had Chevy. We went off on weekends and we went to dog shows and had a great time. We did real well. And it got to the point where I knew Chevy's career, he was getting a little bit of age, and I knew it was going to be time to retire him. And I desperately wanted a puppy out of Chevy to keep showing. And Wade and John had a little male that they kept pushing on me. They said, "This is the dog for you. This is the dog for you." And I saw him and I just didn't really care for him. And we were at a dog show, and John walked into the ring with the 6'9" puppy bitch. And I've never felt the same to this day the way I felt about a dog when I saw her walk in the ring. And that was Judy. And it ended up that she was the litter sister to this dog that they wanted me to take, who grew up to be not a great winning dog, but a great sire. That was Lambert Coupe de Ville, who was Caddy. So Wade didn't want to let her go. And I literally pestered him day after day after day after day after day and asked him for this dog until finally he relented and said, "Just take her." And so to this day, I basically say I didn't pay a penny for either one of these dogs. They were both gifts, and they're the two best gifts I've ever been given, ever. And I'll always be grateful. But Judy was, so at this point now I'm living the high life, doing my, again, working 9 to 5, and I had 2 dogs. And, how incredibly lucky was I that I had 2 dogs, and they were Chevy and Judy. And, so we did great things. She won 4 varieties at the National. She was shown 4 times, won all 4 varieties, won 3 best of breeds, including one for the veterans class. That's that lower right-hand picture. Did, of course, very well at Westminster. She was looking back, just some candids you can, even if you never saw her in real life, you can sort of pick up on the fact that she really exuded a lot of electricity. She was a great show dog. Shown 4 times at Westminster, best variety all 4 times, and had 3 consecutive group placements at Westminster, including a second. So she got a second, a third, and fourth. Never won a group, but that's okay. I was always really proud that of all those best in shows, she won 40. And but they were under, they were, if you said who were the best judges of the time, Mike Billings, Annie Clark, Janie, Joe Gregory, Bob Forsythe, all of them gave her best in shows. This is a dog who wasn't not a great show dog. So many people have heard of Lincoln, but many people have never really seen him. And so here's a picture of Lincoln and actually winning under Jack White. So you can see this is interesting, and just being totally honest, he was obviously a very, very, very true 13-inch dog. Barely 12 inches, I think, a little over 12 inches. You can see he had beautiful type. He had a great little head, beautiful pigment, good bone, good feet, and so forth. I think probably it doesn't take a genius to look at him and to figure out, man, was he straight in the rear end? And unfortunately, that's one fault that carried forward through. So I mean, even 3-4 generations down, sometimes you'd see a dog with a really straight rear end like that and say, must be coming down from Lincoln. And invariably, they almost always did. So it really goes to show that you need to be honest about your dogs, and you need to be very careful, because sometimes a particular fault, while at the time, so what, he's got a little bit of a straight rear, no big deal, but it can haunt you for generations. Interestingly, let's go forward just real quick. So here's his son Will, same thing, right? Where would you pick on this dog? First thing you go to is say, well, man, I sure wish he had a little more rear angle. But how a certain fault can be so, again, just tied to a certain dog and just carry forward. Now, he also threw lots of dogs that had beautiful rear ends, but you just need to always be very careful. This was kind of a fun day. This was the National 99, and that's 4 generations of dogs there. So I've got Chevy. He was not entered. He was, I don't know, he was probably 12 or so years old there. But on the right-hand side was Judy. She won the variety there from the veterans class. Sharon is with Lincoln. So that is Judy's son. So father, Chevy, Judy, his daughter. Sharon in the back with Lincoln, who is Judy's son. And then Teresa Malinsky on the right has Polo, who was Lambert Dressed for Success, and he was best of winners at that national, and he was the son of Lincoln. So we had Chevy, the best variety winner from the veterans class. Lincoln was best stud dog, and then Lincoln's son Polo was best of winners. So that was kind of cool. This was my second best in show dog. That was a little 13-inch bitch called Lexus. I look back on her and I think she's probably even a better dog than I thought she was at the time. She's pretty nice. I'd like to have her today. This is a real fun dog that I showed that belonged to Caroline and Aileen. I think he's actually one of the few dogs I actually specialed that I didn't own or co-own. But I just showed him for Aileen and Caroline. But it was a fun dog to show, won a lot of groups. Grace, of course, made quite a name for herself. A couple varieties at the Garden, Group 2 at the Garden, breed at the National. She won the group at the very first AKC National Championship under Annie, which was a big source of pride. There's a little candid of her in the best in show ring there. There's her little brother, Will, who's also best in show dog. Uno, of course, everybody knows. I use this picture because a picture on the left, that's his very first best in show. That was on the Florida circuit, January. Nobody knew who this dog was outside, Beagle people did. But in the rest of the dog world, nobody had any idea who this dog was. And he burst on the scene. It was the first show of the Florida circuit. He went best in show. And basically, he was only shown that year, and he never looked back. He went best in show at that first show. And then, of course, it was just this run, ultimately leading up to that great best in show. I will say one thing about Uno, that he had, I've been in contact with a lot of dogs over my life, and Uno had, without question for me, the most incredible, best temperament that I've ever encountered on any dog of any breed. He was just phenomenal. In particular, and this is where he's shown. He could read the room like no other dog I've ever encountered. The ability to go into Madison Square Garden under a floodlight and just turn it on and put on this incredible show, versus to be at a Ronald McDonald House with all these young children who are suffering, and so and his ability to innately read the room and know how to behave and act. And he knew when to be boisterous and loud, and he knew when to be just the most gentle, loving soul that you could imagine. And so while his obviously that show record I'll always be proud of, and he and Aaron did great things together. But his post garden career is what made him truly a great dog. Carson was, of course, a really successful stud. John and I have never been, and Wade as well, have never been real numbers focused. So none of us sat here and kept count. I have no idea how many champions Carson sired. I know at one point we ran a report and it was over 80 champions. I suspect he probably sired close to 100 or over 100.
Wow.
He was a dog that, was again, a great little 13-inch dog. I struggled with his temperament. He was soft, and he did not want to do it for me. He liked me okay, but he didn't love me, which was hard for me, to handle, because all my other specials that I really showed, I was very lucky that we had, really tight, close bonds, and they truly loved me, and I loved them. And this is a dog, he and I we just didn't really get along well. But that's just being honest. But he was a good little dog. These are dogs that had just a different place and time. Maybe they would have been really famous. I don't know, but they were lesser famous dogs, but just still accomplished a whole lot. Kevin was champion Fur Cone Country Cousin, and he was best of breed at the national in 94, 95 under Annie. And then Vegas is a little 13-inch bitch that won the variety. Interestingly enough, all three, there were 3 puppies in that litter. All 3 were multiple group winners. Her brother was Motor City. And then I can't remember her sister's name, but her sister was a best in show dog. And then, of course, a Runner that Carol and I owned. Runner was one of those dogs, when people talk about what do you pick as a puppy, there's certainly, he had lots of virtues, he had some faults. But when you talk about how do you pick out a puppy, he is sort of the stereo poster child of you pick this dog out because of his temperament. Because this was a dog that said, I want to be a show dog. And, he told you, and you had no choice but to listen to him. You just looked at him. He was just he was a fun dog to show. Sage was the bitch from Australia, who I really, really liked. It was really unfortunate. We bred her to Carson before she went back to Australia, and it just did not click. It was she had 5 puppies, and they were in the 40 some years I've been involved in beagles, they were the ugliest 5 puppies I've ever seen. Bred to Carson, who was this great sire, and she's this beautiful bitch, but it just didn't click. And then she went back to Australia and had beautiful puppies there. So, go figure. Of course, Miss P is probably, she's probably my personal favorite in terms of the dogs I've had, in terms of, I just adored her. I can't really say enough about her. And the whole experience with Will and Wayne and Lori, and just it was a fun ride. Well, Crushy was the last dog that I showed myself. Probably she'll probably end up being the last dog that I special myself. So it was nice that we could go out and win a best in show. For those people that are thinking about judging, just understand what a long journey this is. So that was my first sweepstakes assignment at the National back in 1995. I got licensed for beagles in 2009. I got initially started with 2 breeds, beagles and min pins, and it took me until 2016 to finish up and get the hound group. So for people that are thinking about judging, start young, because it's a long, arduous, slow process.
Nice.
Liz, I think you're out there. Here's a picture of you. Obviously, the 2 highlights were judging at the Garden and judging the National Beagle Club. It's been fun. I've had the opportunity to go to Australia, Mexico, Canada, the United Kingdom to judge, so that's cool. Some fun stuff. My job is obviously, my interest in canine health and so forth is it's not fake. It's true. And it's taken me to lots of different places, met lots of different people. But just, some of the cool things, like going to China and being on a panel of speakers with the Chinese Kennel Club, so some different things there have been kind of cool and fun. I think it's important to give back and stay involved. So with the National Beagle Club throughout these years, I think I joined the big National Beagle Club, I don't know, probably early 80s. And during the course of time, I've served multiple terms as the supporting members director, supporting membership secretary. I was the AKC Gazette columnist. I was a national specialty show chair for twice. I'm currently the delegate. So I think it's important. These dog shows don't happen by themselves, and clubs don't happen by themselves. So it's important to be involved, and it's fun, And when I said I've never been without the breed since, that holds true. So even today, while I don't have a house full of big winning show dogs, I do have Mikey and Trudy, and I've become sort of an obsessed pet owner. So there they are recently, and if I can make this work, it's just cute.
I love it.
Wish you guys to watch.
Well, I hate to do this, but we probably should wrap up. This has been just absolutely fabulous. It's been fun to see the path that you have gone down, to get your wisdom and your insight. You mentioned that you're the AKC delegate. Is there anything that we need to know about that's going on, or it's just kind of an interesting time.
I'll just be painfully honest. I've been a delegate now for 20 years. And when I became a delegate, I was like young, enthusiastic, and rah, 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 I'm going to change the world. And through the course of time, I've realized that basically you don't get to change much of anything. You don't have much of, so I'm kind of a cynical 20-year-old delegate now. It's also kind of interesting because, while I serve for the National Beagle Club as the delegate, we also always need to remember our National Beagle Club, while we love it, is a different beast than any other parent club. Mm-hmm. It's a group that at its core and its purity is all about the pack trials. And so the ultimate leadership, I think we're lucky that we can just do our own thing and we don't have people breathing down our necks. But in terms of the relationship with the American Kennel Club, it's basically, they really don't care, because that National Beagle Club, from their perspective, they don't even hold AKC events. The pack trials are self-run. They have their own stud book for the packs. So most of those people don't even register their beagles with the American Kennel Club. So it's a very odd, kind of odd relationship there.
It is. Well, as I said, Eddie, this has been absolutely fantastic, and I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I mentioned we've got I have a couple more programs that I've been noodling on. I've asked John and Peggy Shaw if they would present at a future date. I think that would be a lot of fun. And of course, we have to have some poems and stories from John. I've also, you just mentioned.
So for those that don't know, that's Peggy Shaw there on the left.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the parent club. I have asked Mandy Palmer at some point between now and probably summer to present on the new hunt trial that we are working on and proposing to the AKC, because the goal is that we have that for the first time at Aldi, and we want to share what the kind of what the plan is on that. Claudia in the chat asked here if we would do a program specifically about DNA testing, and Oleg, I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't need to answer right now, but that might be a presentation for you to give. So if anybody has anything that that you want, just let me know. I'm more than happy to try and set these up. I think it's a great format to be able to do this. Lots of people are saying thank you in the chat, Eddie. Fabulous picture to end with. Do you have anything that you want to wrap up with?
I think I would just use the quote at the bottom. I don't know how many people remember Chuck Kitchell, but that was his famous catchphrase, was happy beagling. Mm-hmm. And so despite all the other odd things that are going on in our world right now, I think we, at least I always personally get solace by coming home and spending time with my dogs. Mm-hmm. So I thank them, and I thank you guys for the time.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, everyone.